The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, listen, it is not often that I am outdressed on these podcasts, but today I am outdressed by Clayton Cuteri. And if you guys are not watching this on Spotify or YouTube, you're missing a sharp dressed gentleman in a nice, I don't know if that's navy or black suit with a red tie, very presidential like, and with the flag of the United States of these Americas on his lapel. So, hey, what's up, man? How you doing, buddy? Welcome.
I'm doing excellent, and I'm glad you picked up on the presidential look because that's where we'll be one day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, listen, everybody. This is actually going to be like 2 episodes in one, because most of the time when I bring on guests, to be honest, we're talking about like a topic from the past or some type of specific topic. But here's the beauty with you. We're going to talk about your new party that you and a few other guys have started, and we may get into that in a second. But the other thing is, honestly, man, I've consumed a ton of your content, as I was telling you before we hit record. And I mean, you remind me of myself in a lot of ways. You really do. Your viewpoints are very logical. They're very common sense. They're also something that I think more of America needs to hear. And what's great about today is it's basically going to be an episode about your political party, but we're also going to actually talk about everything that's going on in the world right now. So it'll be a very current episode. And actually, before we get into your party, let's start off with that, because I listened to your past couple podcasts on your podcast, and, I really like your perspective on the Epstein stuff. So, what do you think is going on with this? Like, what is the deal with the Epstein files, or lack thereof?
Starting off strong, huh?
Yeah. We gotta hook people in the beginning.
Well, it's a difficult one, because I think that there's a lot of potential realities that are going on here as to why things may or may not be happening, why they're not releasing them. I think it doesn't look good politically whenever you have your attorney general saying that they're on my desk, and then you have Bongino saying we're looking into it, there's tens of thousands of hours, and then they don't have them, and then we want to just cover it up like it never existed. Meanwhile, Trump campaigned on it. So I think all of it is it's very confusing, to say the least. And I think whenever you're someone who's leading this country, the one thing you shouldn't be is confusing, because as the leader of a country, if you're confused, then the rest of your people are confused, and that's not a good place to be. So, outside of that, it's a lot of theories, in my opinion. And I think, there's a lot of potential people who are probably on that list. But at the same time, I do still believe, like, in the court of law, and I think that we need to trust the process and trust that the DOJ will investigate it, that they will look through those files, and that they will, come to the conclusion that is what it is. Because I think you have a situation where, someone was convicted of child trafficking, of a ton of other illegal things with children, and yet we don't have any people, any clients. We don't know who they were, where they went, where the kids are, any of this stuff. It's all hush hush. And you could argue that that's a part of the legal process until everything's all wrapped up. But at this point, it seems a little disingenuous. But at the end of the day, I still stand firm that we need to trust the process and trust the judicial system that they'll come out with and eventually tell us what's actually going on.
Yeah. I'll tell you though, I don't trust the process anymore. I really don't, unfortunately. And, here's the big elephant in the room, in my opinion, about it is, you've got people saying, oh, Trump's on it. Trump's on the list. He went to the island and he did this. I'll give you my thoughts and then give me yours. I honestly don't think he did. I don't think he is on the list in the way that maybe Prince Andrew or a Bill Clinton even is on the list. I do think he palled around with Epstein. I think they ran around together in Florida. They partied together. They did all of that stuff. Who knows? Maybe they had a falling out. Maybe that's why he banned him from Mar-a-Lago, whatever. but I don't think he's nefariously on the list. What I do think is I don't think that he wants to allow the connection to be made between Epstein to Mossad, Mossad to Israel, and then tell the American people, hey, it was the Israeli government that's honeypot us for 20 plus years. So, with everything that you see with Trump being so pro Israel, I mean, like just to where he has completely fractured his own base, to me, I think it's that with him. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there is a lot of evidence that does support, I don't see any smoke and gun, which I think is the difficult part that
Right.
directly connects Epstein to Mossad. But there is a lot of circumstantial evidence and facts that we know about. Obviously, there's far more intelligent people on the matter, but from what I've seen, what I've been exposed to, it does seem likely. Again, this could be a reason that they're keeping it hush hush because you don't want to incriminate or, if there's any other operations that they have going on, who knows? I
Yeah.
do believe that, and I think this is probably something we'll get into at some point in the podcast, but regardless, I think at some level, if he is or he isn't, I think you can just look at APAC and their influence over all of our politicians, over our president. Whenever you give somebody money, you expect a return on your investment. You don't just
That's
give
right.
people money for no reason. So if you're contributing to someone's campaign and you're a foreign country, I mean, I think that might be one of the most treasonous things that a politician could do, because you're literally saying that regardless if it benefits my citizens, the people who I'm supposed to be serving, I'm going to be your slave. I'll be your puppet. When the reality is that we should demand politicians only accept money from the American citizens, because in my opinion, and the way I'm going to run my campaign and my future campaigns is to only accept money from the citizens, because I see political office as being in servitude or essentially being the slave of the citizens of that country. And so, in a way, it could be you could see the Epstein file and the Mossad connection as almost this smoke and mirror, when all the further we have to look is APAC. The millions of dollars they've given to Trump, the millions of dollars they've given to senators, to House of Representatives, and anyone who steps out of line, Thomas Massey, for instance, they get a primary against them. So it's not really a shocker to me. I think, if we want to talk about smoke and gun evidence, I think we should focus there. But at the same time, we do need to have justice on the Epstein files and who those clients are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's just caused such a loss of credibility for the administration and for all of these people involved. Bongino and Cash Patel being the two biggest. Those guys were beating the Epstein drum for 4 years on every podcast, on their own podcast. I mean, there's so many clips of Dan Bongino saying, guys, we can't let them get away with this. We've got to keep putting the pressure on, from as recent as 2023 and 2024. And now here they are in a position to put the pressure on and to give the truth. And again, it's 3 card Monty. They're moving things here, they're moving things there. I'll tell you my prediction of what's going to happen next.
Love to
You
hear.
keep seeing Ghislaine Maxwell, or Ghislaine Maxwell, however you pronounce her first name, and they're talking about giving her. She said, hey, I'm willing to testify. I bet you they'll cut a deal with her. She'll testify in front of Congress. She'll testify the way they want her to testify and get her immunity. What does she have to lose? She's sitting in jail for 20 years. I don't think she cares about protecting Jeffrey Epstein anymore. So basically, she'll come out and say, oh, there was nothing. It was all Epstein. I was his consigliere or concierge, and I set everything up for him. And she'll get out, and then they'll basically say, see everybody, case closed. But I don't think people are falling for it, man. I don't think people are falling for it.
I don't think so either, and I hope that's not the case. However, the history of our political system has been letting us down, and I really do think that that's where the American Congress Party comes into play. And whether you vote Republican or Democrat,
Yeah.
neither side has really been a voice for what the people desire, and they continue to let us down. And so, at some point, you have to ask yourself, are we truly being represented in Congress? We're supposed to be a representative democracy, representative constitutional republic, I guess. But the question is, are we even being represented? And, everywhere I look, the answer is no. 80% of Americans are against war. We have people dying on the streets. We have a homeless crisis that's out of control. We have a drug problem that's out of control, and we're not addressing it. The
Yeah.
priority is to send more money to kill innocent people in foreign countries. And I find that to be some of the most evil stuff that's happening on this planet.
Absolutely. All right. So tell us about the American Congress Party. I think people will be very interested to know that you are part of literally a new political party that, hopefully more and more people will get to know through this podcast and others. Tell us about that.
Sure. High level, 2021, it was started by Brandon Conceição, who's the president. And then in 2023, there wasn't too much traction. And then I had him on my podcast, Traveling to Consciousness. And he told me all about essentially his mission, what he's doing, his plans for essentially purifying nature, saving the next generation, because I see it as that's our responsibility. Our duty is to save the next generation, to leave the place better than we found it. So after having him on the podcast, which we didn't even talk about the party, we talked about it off in the green room. And I said, "Yeah, what do you need? How can I join?" So as the second member in 2023, November of 2023, actually November 11th of 2023, became Secretary General of the American Congress Party, and from there it took on a beast of its own. Since then, we've probably have around 40 to 50 members, I would say. There's probably 10 of us that are very deep into it, if you will. You can find them on the website, americancongressparty.com. And our ethos is essentially to protect nature, to serve the next generation, to leave the world better than we found it. And we can get into individual policies, but I think you've heard a couple of them here of no more war, reduce taxes. We need to denuclearize. We need to purify our food, our water. We need to purify our minds and our education system. And lastly, we need free medication. I mean, we're supplying money to countries that have free medication, and not to get into even the whole hydra that is big pharma. They completely controlling our government, right? Through their lobbyist groups. Our politicians are slaves to big pharma. So, we need politicians in here who are going to serve the American people. And I find it that those are the things that people want. I mean, first of all, they want that, and we need that. We deserve that, because majority of those things should be free, and they should enable us to be a human, understand how to be human, right? Whether it's your education or your body, because if any of those two are out of alignment, you're gonna well, you can't be human to say the
Yeah.
least. And so I think we need to start taking care of our own people before we can really tell any other country what to do.
So is this a political party that will rival the Republicans and the Democrats? Like, is this an actual political party? And then talk to us about, how do you even do that? Like, do you have to register somewhere? Do you fill out forms? Like, who recognizes you as a political party?
Definitely. So right now so first of all, to your first question, yes, to rival them, to replace them. We needed to file forms with the FEC. So we're technically viewed right now within the FEC as a political party. Then to get on the ballot within every single state to have certain representatives, you need to get a certain amount of signatures, which are like in the tens of thousands in every state. Bobby Kennedy was doing this whenever he was trying to run.
That's right.
Yeah, so that was a whole thing there. So we're essentially doing that, but from our side, from a side that's not going to just give in to the system and, turn our belly up once push comes to shove. And so, yeah, and then so as I have a personal political action committee, which is to get me elected. So there's a lot of filing, lots of paperwork. They make it very difficult to find all of this information. I remember whenever I decided to run, it took me 5 hours just to figure out how many signatures I needed to get on the ballot as a third party. So they don't make it easy. Seems like it might be by design, but I'll leave that up to you to speculate.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
And so will you guys be registering state by state in order to put candidates in for senator or for someone in the House of Representatives in a variety of states? And then will you or Brian, I think you said, are you guys going to try to run for president in 2028?
Definitely. So, yes to all of the above. We haven't really decided Well, let's take a step back here. So, yes, that's the goal, to have candidates in every single state. We had someone running in Oregon. We had someone running in California who was our presidential candidate in 2024. Her name's Rachel Fiore. I ran in Pennsylvania. And then since then, we've probably had 3 or 4 more people show interest in running. I myself am only 31. So whenever the next presidential election comes around, I'll be 34. So just missing the mark there. We haven't fully discussed with Rachel if she'll be running, but I think we assume that she will be, but we'll see whenever that comes. And yeah, right now it's really just an all out blitz to get our message out there, to let people know that we're here to serve them, serve the next generation. And, it's really going to be a grassroots movement that is all hands on deck from everyone.
I got you. Yeah, I do remember when RFK Jr. left the Democrats and I think became an independent. Getting on the ballot, man, was such a challenge for him. And I think he had a little bit of money behind him with, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on who he picked for his VP. What is her name again?
Was
Oh
it
God.
Shannon? Something Shannon?
Was it Shannon? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. She's actually, it's funny. I didn't think much of her when she was his VP pick. I was like, who is this? This doesn't even make any sense. This is just all a money play. But since then, she's been great because she's actually been very critical of RFK Jr. on a lot of his stuff. That's another guy that I think everybody got excited with the Make America Healthy Again and, all of that energy. And it's like, where is that? Like, what happened? It fell apart on like day 2, it seemed. And, I know they've had a couple wins, but I will say that, that excitement of the Republican Party and Trump and again making America first and all of that stuff that was at its peak, I think, inauguration day. I think the next day it was like deflated and gone. The second Trump brings in, the CEO of Pfizer and Sam Altman to talk about Stargate and mRNA vaccines. And everyone's like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what? This is crazy. All right. So you guys, I mean, listen, I give my hats off to you guys for, going for this. So will this be like a rival to like even the Libertarian Party? Like how close or how similar are you guys to those guys maybe?
It's a good question. I think that, and I haven't done a whole lot of research recently on Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
I would say that was probably where I identified most with before now. I think Libertarian Party leans a little bit more just kind of do whatever you want as long as it's not illegal or hurting other people. Versus, I think that we are finding more of a balance between understanding that there are certain issues that government does need to fix and needs to step in to fix, whether it's people who physically can't take care of themselves, they don't have proper education, they don't have proper access to food or proper access to medication, or they've just had the worst string of luck in their entire life. You never know. I mean, I've seen countless homeless videos of people who, they were serving in the military and then this happened and that happened. And I think, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but my opinion is that the Libertarian Party is more just, well, they need to figure it out for themselves, versus the American Congress Party is more, we can't impose on the free market. We need to allow that to exist. However, there are certain things that we should not be subjugating to the free market, such as our bodies, right? We shouldn't be making profit the number one goal whenever it becomes your health or your education. We need to be aligning with things that improve your body, your mind, your spirit. Because if your body's out of alignment, if your mind's out of alignment, if you're juiced up on SSRIs, whatever it is, you're going to be disconnected from your soul and you're going to be disconnected from your mission here on earth. And I think that there's no greater mistake as a civilization to allow that to occur.
Okay. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Do you guys have any religious affiliation?
Nothing specifically. I identify as spiritual, and I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I assume majority of people would identify as being spiritual.
Okay. Okay. And then were you guys a Republican or Democrat before this? What were you before this?
Well, I don't want to speak for everybody again. Everyone
Yeah.
has their own journey to this. Myself, I was I was brought up in a Republican household, so ipso facto, I just identified as that. I was, let's see here, 2015 or 2016, I was in love with Trump. He was saying everything that needed to be said. And then 2015 rolled around, I voted. 2016 rolled around, I voted for him. I loved this guy who was brash. I knew the economy was in trouble. We should get in someone who's an outsider. At least
Mhm.
it seemed that way.
Right.
And then as quickly as I voted for him, I think I felt that just deflation right away. And I slowly started thinking like, what's going on? You know, I actually lost a friend who was not in death, but just like as a friend because they were a huge Hillary supporter. And to me, it just awoken something within me of how is this possible? How can I let politics completely ruin, you know, something that's far more real than these people who we're electing? And so it kind of sent me on my own journey in a way. 2020, I actually did vote for the libertarian candidate, which was Joe Jorgensen, I believe. And then this past year, I voted for Rachel Fiore. So my background was diehard MAGA to, you know, figuring out that we need to create a new path than what has been presented to us before.
That's interesting. Wow, okay. That's actually honestly, that gives you a lot more, not a lot more, credibility in my opinion. You know,
How so?
I get very I get very interested when I meet people who were like diehard Trump or super, you know, team Trump, and they've been disenchanted a little bit. And to me that kind of makes sense because if you don't fall into this, you know, I call it Trump worship syndrome. You know, there's Trump derangement syndrome, which I think is rampant among, you know, so many Democrats and so many people on the liberal side of things. Thank you, Greg Stoker. But there's also this Trump worship syndrome where people just think the guy can do no wrong. And it's been for me personally, it's been, you know, kind of like just a real awakening to be like, okay, you know, I did think this was like using a Game of Thrones analogy, like the breaker of chains. If there was anybody who was going to do away with the uniparty and, you know, two heads of the same snake or whatever analogy you want to use for the Republicans and Democrats, I really did think it was going to be him. You know, 2016, he comes in, I can even cut him some slack because I don't think he realized what a minefield politics in Washington was. He surrounded himself with the wrong people. He literally brought in neocon after neocon to advise him. John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, like all of these people are just trash. And now I was like, okay, he learned from all those experiences. And here we are 6 months in practically. And like, what's the difference? Like, there's no difference between him and Biden. I want to ask you about, and I learned this listening to your podcast. Talk to us a little bit about this Greater Israel project. And let's shift gears because I would like your thoughts on Gaza, on what's going on with all that, because I know you've been pretty boisterous about that. And yeah, man, give us your thoughts there.
Yeah, so the Greater Israel Project is essentially an idea that was perpetuated by the Zionists. And I think that before we dive into this, it's very important that we break apart the difference between Israelis, Jews, and Zionists because they're all
Sure.
different
Yep.
and they can overlap. So Jews would be someone who's ethnically or religiously practiced Judaism. Israeli would be someone born in Israel or an Israeli citizen, a citizen of Israel. And then you have Zionists who, in my opinion, there's not like a hardcore definition, but my opinion and the way I see it used is people who believe that Judaism people are chosen by God, that they are the supremes of this world, that everyone else should essentially bow before them, and that they believe that they are entitled essentially to the world. I mean, that's the way that I see it. Now, the Greater Israel Project, which I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, but he was essentially the founder, I think, of the project around whenever Israel was created. And the idea was essentially for Israel to extend to the way that it was portrayed in the Bible, which is like, you know, you need to look at it on a map, but it's like parts of Egypt, parts of Yemen, parts of Syria, parts of like it extends that far out. And so you couple that idea, if you will, with what we're seeing happen with the likes of Bibi Netanyahu, who has been videotaped talking about Greater Israel and promoting that idea. You couple this with recent events of the prime minister, I believe, of the UK, and then you have Macron of France, the president there, coming out and saying that they're about to recognize Palestine as a state.
Yeah.
And to which Bibi has responded saying, well, we can't allow that because then that gives Hamas area to fire off weapons into Israel. So by saying that, just by that statement alone, to me indicates that he has no intention of stopping this genocide. He has no intention of killing innocent people. He has no intention of, this famine that's going on. The entire world sees it, but he wants to sit there and say it's not occurring. To me, it fits his agenda of this ethnic cleansing so that he can expand, take over Gaza, take over the West Bank, which they have been doing military operations in recently that nobody's talking about.
Right.
And then that's just the starting spot. It's again now circumstantial, but if you go back and tie in the wars that America has fought on their behalf, whether it's Iraq, Iran, whether it's Syria, Libya,
Yep.
Yemen, you're
Afghanistan. Yeah.
destabilizing governments. You're going to radicalize people against you. I mean, that's why they chant death to America, death to Israel, death to the UK when you're in Iran, is because we've destabilized all their neighbors. We've made it a much worse place. I mean, Libya was about to have an economic boon under Gaddafi, and then it was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, let's not do that. So the key here, though, I think is that, and what I really don't really capture too much in my reels, but I think it's important to mention, we need to learn to stand with the innocent people, whether they're Israeli, whether they're Jewish, whether they're Palestinian, they're Muslim, Ukrainian, Russian. It's the innocent people that die in these wars of their rulers who are not interested in peace, who see no consequences of the war. And I think it's probably, again, one of the most evil things that happens on this planet is we have these massive exterminations of human life, and the leaders see no repercussions whatsoever. They sit in their ivory towers. Their families are completely fine. Nothing happens to them, but it's our brothers and sisters who end up dying. So my heart really goes out to all of the innocent people that are in Gaza, all the innocent people that are in Israel who were massively protesting Bibi Netanyahu before October 7th. And then
Right.
all of that disappeared because they basically created was it like martial law and said, no, you can't do this anymore. And so you got to realize that it's the leaders. It's not the countries. It's not all Jews. It's not all Israelis. It's not all Palestinians. It's not all this. It's
Right.
not all that. It's the leaders against the innocent people.
That was very well said, man. That was very well said. And I agree with you 100%. It is not all one set of people. It is really those leaders. And it's kind of no different when you think about the United States. Like, again, everybody who lives in the United States should love the United States as a country. They should love us as people. But it's that group of leaders. I mean, you look back at what George W. Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, that whole neocon project for a new American century, what all those guys did, which was quite frankly, fool everybody into 9/11, into a 20-year forever war. And so, that stuff is unforgivable, but they're never held accountable. They're just never held accountable. It's insane. All right.
Yeah,
That was
20
very
in the
well said.
20-year war you're mentioning, by the way, was $7 trillion and almost 1 million lives that were
Right.
lost in the Middle East. And I think about 500,000 were civilians.
Yeah,
So, and what did we have to
absolutely.
show for it? And
I
we
mean,
did this
think
all under the
about that.
guise of delivering democracy. Whenever it was their
Exactly.
rulers that they put in charge, their rightful kings that we should have just let alone. There's no reason
Absolutely.
for us to be going in and imposing our will. We did the same thing in Iran, and that's why they shall chat now death to America, because we took out and installed the Shah, and it's a pattern that we have seen over and over again within America. And I truly believe that we need to take care of our own house before we could tell anyone else what to do.
Yeah.
Whenever we see our own people, everyone living like kings and queens, when we see gold plated roads outside, everyone's driving in a Bentley, then maybe at that point we can start telling other people what to do. But until
Right.
that happens, I think it is one of the most hypocritical and ugly things that we can do as a country.
No, absolutely. Okay, you did a great episode on the big beautiful bill, and I honestly have not talked about that very much on this podcast, which is I am remiss in doing that. I should have done that. But you know what? You don't have to get into the weeds on it, but if you want, give us your top line thoughts on why the big beautiful bill is not a beautiful bill.
The top line items is it's all a political game. All these omnibus spending bills are just a political game. And honestly, I think that we need to get rid of omnibus spending bills in general because it can create a lot of confusion. And we'll dive into how they do that here. So first of all, the reason Trump wanted this to pass so much was so that he could put on his resume that he gave, the no tax on overtime, the no tax on tips, which are all set to expire, by the way, in 2028. However, they snuck in a tax deduction, I believe, for corporations, which does not expire or have any limitations on. And then the nefarious part comes in is whenever they will put in certain things about, let's see here. Thomas Massey did a great job of explaining this. They'll put in things about giving more money to the military or increasing military pay. So if you vote against the omnibus bill, you now just voted against military pay. So
Right.
now you can get slandered essentially in the media for voting against military pay when the reality is this bill is going to add $5 trillion in debt. Meanwhile, we're already $37 trillion in debt. And I don't know what percentage of your listeners run a bank, or not a bank, but a company. I mean, you can just look at your own life. If you're in debt, then things you can't do anything. Like you're beholden to other people. It goes back to that
Right.
same slave conversation we talked about. So I see this as a huge it was disgusting in my opinion because you're slapping everybody in the face. You're going on lying about how it's so great. It's obviously in the name, one big beautiful bill. It's definitely big. It was not beautiful. And furthermore, it slapped everything Doge did in the face. They
Yeah.
removed so much of waste, fraud, and abuse, at least on the surface, right? From the media, it's what it seemed like. And then they turn around and say, well, we're going to raise our debt ceiling $5 trillion. And I think the American people deserve better. And I think it's apprehensible that we have a Congress that does not respect the will of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned Thomas Massey a couple times. Is that somebody you like?
Yeah, I do. I think
Yeah.
he's very principled. I'm probably not 100% in line with him ideologically, but I think let me put it like this. I like anybody who is very clearly voting based on their conscience and what they believe is right for the American people. And the unfortunate thing is there's so few of them nowadays that it's really hard to find them. But I see him as being one of them.
No, I totally agree, and there are so few of them. The Doge stuff, man, it's like all that stuff was so weird. It's like, what happened to Elon? Where's Elon now? And again, everyone no, actually, nobody's talking about it anymore. It's like things come in and out so fast. There's so much noise in our news cycle, and we've kind of been groomed to like the crisis du jour or the crisis of the week. What mass shooting happened today? What big event? What submarine exploded? What this, what that. And, the how close Elon and Trump got, and then it just exploded. Even that makes no sense to me. Like I don't get it. But I will say I'm kind of glad I see Elon now pushing back on things. Maybe you guys need to get him onto the American Congress Party and have him fund you.
I always said when he came out with the American Party, I said he's one word off.
That's funny. How,
He's
how did
missing
you
one
guys
word.
come up with that I guess title for the party?
It's a good question. You'd have to ask Brandon Conce,
Okay.
Sal.
Okay.
I
All right.
never asked that question, but that is a good question.
All right, I'll have to ask him. Okay. All right, what else, man? What else? Anything else that you wanted to share in terms of the party? How do people find you guys? How do they support you guys? Are you able to fundraise? Like, does it happen through your PAC or how does that go? Somebody wants to chip in $100 or $1,000. How does that work?
Yeah, I believe we have the donate now all set up on the AmericanCongressParty.com. You donate directly to the American Congress Party in that case. Donating to me specifically, I believe I have it set up as well on my website, which is Clayton Cuteri. Well, it's Clayton24.com, but I need to update that. But yeah, that's essentially how people would donate. And, just in my opinion, I think we have to realize we got to come together at the end of the day, whether you're Democrat or Republican, there's issues that go across the borders, and to sit back and think, well, this person votes Democrat, so I don't like them. This person votes Republican, I don't like them, is not the case. And I had a crazy experience that really opened my eyes when I was going door to door. So to get signatures, you got to get people in your district. So I'm going door to door, knocking on doors, and I knock on this lady, and instantly you could just tell she was a Kamala supporter, just instantly. And she's asking me about the policies that I believe in, what my ideas are, and so I'm telling her, and she's like, "Wow, this is amazing. This is so great. I'm gonna sign. If I see you on the ballot, I'll vote for you. This is amazing." Da 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 da. And as I turn to leave, she's like, "Oh, by the way, that guy next door, like, good luck getting him to sign." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Tom, he won't sign. You'll see." I'm like, "Okay, we'll see." So I knock on Tom's door, and right when he opens, just he's wearing like a MAGA hat. He's probably got some guns in the corner of the room. Just instantly could see it. And I'm like, this is what she meant. So I get talking to Tom. The next thing you know, 5 minutes later, he's like, "This is amazing. This is great. How do I support you guys? What do we do?" I'm like, "Well, let's start off by signing here. I'll give you, my business card, and we'll see what happens." And so walking away from that, I realized that, we are very disconnected from our neighbors. We're disconnected from talking about the things that actually matter most in our lives, such as the quality of the food that you're putting in your mouth, the
Yeah.
quality of water you're putting in your mouth. And we've become very divided. I mean, I think that was a whole social programming aspect of COVID, stay inside, don't talk to people, become anxious. And so I think that we need to get back to realizing that we have far more in common than we do different. And the more that we realize that, the more that we realize that this television is lying to us, it's deceiving us. Like you even said, there's always something new on the news, and it's only what they want you to think about. It's what they want you to talk about. And the more you can kind of pull yourself away from that, the more you can see the bigger picture, the more you can connect, if you will, to your inner divinity. And that's really when you get to start experiencing freedom and you get to start playing out your divine role here on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought after you got Tom's signature, I thought you were going to say, and then Tom said, "Hey, good luck getting the lady next door to sign." And so that would have been funny, which he probably was thinking. But you
You
know
know
what?
what?
You made a great point, man. Our, neighbors that are disconnected now, life was a lot better and simpler back, 20 years ago, even longer than that, where it was like, any town USA. Like I look back, I grew up in Ohio and I look back to where I grew up at. And I mean, yeah, it was simple, but it was beautiful. It was fantastic. It was like leave the house at 8 in the morning, come back at 8 o'clock at night, eat lunch at friend's house and not have a care in the world and not be looking at devices, but be out there playing and riding your bike. And, that Americana, man, we need to tap back into that. And maybe the American Congress Party can help us tap back into, Americana.
I see it as a possibility. I see it as maybe Americana 2.0, because I
Yeah,
think that there were
Americana
definitely still
2.0.
a lot of issues that we may not have been privy to.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to that Tom thing real quick. I did forget a piece of that whenever he did go to sign, right before he started writing his signature, he like was shocked because he saw the name of the person next door. And he was like, "Oh, you got her to sign? Like what? Like that doesn't make sense."
That's funny. That's funny. Hey, you know what? You might have repaired their neighborly relationship. So there's already one step in the right direction. All right, listen, man, I know you're a little pressed for time today. I have one ask of you, and that is you got to come back on. And I don't know if that's next year or when it's election time, but obviously we want to keep updated as to what's going on and understanding how you're making the progress. I think it'll be interesting for people to understand how it's going on a state by state level and whether you guys can get on all of the ballots, and then really what it takes to get on the national ballot for the president of the United States in 2028. Man, that would be amazing. If you end up winning, that'll be super cool. I will have interviewed a president of the United States.
Well, it might not be till 2032,
That's
but
right. That's right. That's right.
so
You're
it'll
not
either be
afraid.
2032 or 2030, what, 2038? Oh, six,
2036. Yeah,
six,
yeah. Right.
2036. So yeah,
Well,
so you'll be able to have that mantle, get the little ribbon ready that
yeah, exactly.
you can put
Exactly.
over it. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to come across as arrogant. I hopefully this comes across more as confident, but I think what people don't realize is when you start to purify your body, you start to purify your mind, you reduce the stress in your life, you become calm, then you can start seeing your path in life. You get to see with what I call your inner eye, which is kind of this, I would say your soul, if you will, that will show you the path you're on in life, and it will guide you to where you need to go. And I do this on my podcast with Traveling to Consciousness. I do those Indigo Education podcasts. I don't know if you got a chance to look at those, but they're very spiritual in nature, and they will awaken your inner eye to seeing what the future holds, to seeing what things will unfold in your life if you're open to it. And so, it's not a matter of, I understand there's a lot more I need to learn, but I'm very confident in the fact that one day we'll be president. So I'm happy I can give you that pleasure.
I love that, man. By the way, did you grow up Catholic or Christian? Did you grow up religiously?
I was born Presbyterian,
Okay.
and do you want we want the long bit of it?
Give me whatever you want to give. Yeah.
So I grew up Presbyterian, and it was about high school. So it might have been like 2012-ish, whenever the gay rights movement was happening, that gays should be married. Now, personally, I think there's a whole conversation around marriage, but putting that to the side, regarding rights, I think everyone should have the same equal rights. So the fact that a man and woman can get married, of course, man and man, woman, whatever, as long as everyone's consenting, it's legal, go for it.
Absolutely.
The thing that shocked me is I was a Presbyterian, and the entire Presbyterian denomination decided that they were going to change the Bible. It no longer would say between a man and a woman, it would say between two people.
Mm.
And it shocked me because I was like, this is our sacred holy text. Are we allowed to change this? And that sent me down a rabbit hole of, has this been changed before? And so all of that kind of like unwound and that was the first time I went super viral on TikTok. The account has now been deleted because of speaking too much things that people don't want you to speak about. But the big thing was like talking about certain texts that didn't make it into the Bible, that were texts of Jesus's followers, to realize that the Bible was put together 400 years after Jesus was on earth, to realize Jesus probably spoke Aramaic and Greek, but then the Bible was written in Latin. And then you got to change it from Latin to Greek to English. So you're losing a whole bunch of contextual items. And so it got to this point with me where I was like, what am I allowed to trust here? And so I think that there are things in the Bible that are truthful, and that's what hooks people. But then there's things in there that will kind of teeter you. It'll kind of pull you away from your inner eye, if you will. It'll close you off. It'll disconnect you from your soul and your spirit. Now, whether that's on purpose or by accident, I'll leave that up for the individuals to decide. But I do believe that, there are truths. Jesus existed. I have a picture of Jesus behind me. And so I think that he set a good role model. I believe in him. I connect to him, if you will, however you do that, whether you pray or however you want to define it. And so, that really sent me down a path of like, what is true? And so I started just studying every religion I could, for the most part. And so when I say I'm spiritual, I believe that there's this underlying bedwork of interconnectivity between all of the religions. I think that, spirituality, people can define it how they want, but I see it as, we're all one family. We're all children of the same creator. Whether you want to say God, source, nature, spirit, Allah, they're all the same. And, maybe, Ray, you're like a dad to me, or like a brother to me, or maybe a cousin. And the more I've started realizing that you have that connection with every single person you talk to. And so if you want a fun little challenge, if you will, or a fun little experiment, next time you're talking with people who aren't related to you, see what category they fit under. Some people will feel like a dad, some a son, maybe a sister, a brother, maybe girlfriend, maybe cousin, aunt, uncle. It's all there. It's all right in front of our
Right.
eyes, but we've created this disconnection from within ourselves. And religiously they put it in the church, or they put it in the synagogue, or you have to go through someone else to connect to source or to nature or to God, when the reality is that it's within us. We were created out of that divine beauty, and it's up to us to reconnect to it.
Love it, man. Love it. All right, listen, hang on the line. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Clayton Cuteri and the American Congress Party. Keep that on the front burner, because I have a feeling you're going to be hearing that a lot more. And yeah, let's watch these guys make a run at hopefully dismantling this two-party system, which I think is the bane of our existence and has been for a long time. And It is actually refreshing that people are seeing that, people are calling that out, and especially refreshing that guys like Clayton are actually doing something about it. So anyway, call a spade, everybody. Clayton, hang on the line. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon.
This episode was brought to you by Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Zip more, smoke less. Totally satisfying, discreet, and delicious. Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks are available in 6 great flavors, each containing at least 2 milligrams of nicotine to curb those cravings. Zippix is FDA registered and proudly made in the USA. Use discount code DSD for 10% off your order at zippixtoothpicks.com. Zip more, smoke less, save 10%.